name is Richard Bodiner, and I'm co-owner of this wonderful shop with my lovely wife Michelle Bodiner, who's behind the camera just around there. If you turn around you'll see her. Today I'm doing something very exciting. I've been planning for a couple of years to do a video where I demonstrate different strings, so that we can sort of, like, I'll put a set of strings on one particular violin, and then by the magic of television you'll hear those strings played, and then straight away you'll hear the next set of strings played on exactly the same violin without having to wait for the string changing time in between. And I'll do that for all of the different Pirastro strings and the different Thomastik strings. It's going to be very exciting for me. So some of the strings that we will be demonstrating are the Infeld Red, the Infeld Blue, Titanium Solo, Vision Titanium Solo, the Vision, and Dominant. They're all the Thomastik strings that we're going to be demonstrating today. And then Pirastro strings we'll demonstrate will be the Pirastro Tonica, the Pirastro Piranito, the Evah Pirazzi, the new Evah Pirazzi GOLD with the gold G string, the Obligato with the gold E string, the Violino set, and the Oliv set. So they're all the ones we'll be doing today. I would be doing the Vision solo ones, not the Titanium solo, but I'm out of stock, sorry. Okay, so first of all, I'll be what I'll be doing is I'll be playing each of those sets of strings, and then I'll tell you what I think about that particular set of strings. I'll ramble on a bit about that particular string, and then I'll go to the next string, and I'll go through all of those strings and do that way. At the end of the video, you'll see me playing each of the strings straight after each other by the magic of television. And then you'll go to our website and you'll buy those strings. So first up we have the Pirastro Tonica strings, which are the strings that I put on just about every violin that we have in our shop. Once I've made our bridges and sound posts for each violin, I'll put on the Pirastro Tonica strings, and then I'll have a play, because to me they are the strings that make a violin sound the way it sort of should sound. They sound sort of not too bright, not too mellow, they're not too slow to respond, they're not enormously quick to respond, but they are quick. So they're right there in the middle. And then if I think that particular violin sounds too bright, then I might use a different type of string that's more mellow. If that sounds too mellow, I'll use one that sounds brighter, and all of those sorts of things. So first of all, Pirastro Tonica strings. So exactly what I said, they're sort of right in the middle as far as brightness goes. They have quite a lot of ring to them, which is really nice. So if I play a string and let the bow off, the sound continues. And certain strings will have more ring than others. The Pirastro Tonica ones have slightly more than standard, which is great for like quite an affordable string. They're reasonably powerful strings, they're quite soft under your fingers, and I really like them. I think they're great. Next string. Now for the Pirastro Piranito strings. These are used on a lot of school instruments. They tend to have quite a long life, which is really good. I like to use the Pirastro Tonica strings anyway on school instruments because I like the sound better, and they're pretty cheap. They're like $26 at the time of this video anyway. But if you're looking for a cheap string, they're durable, and they're quite nice sounding strings. Now I'll give them a play so you can hear what they sound like. Okay, now in relevant terms to the tonica, the Piranito strings, they're a little bit slower to respond on the G string there. I had to work a little bit harder to get the sound out. The sound was a little bit thinner, and it didn't ring quite as much as the tonica. The tonica really sort of rings out. These sort of, didn't ring quite as much. The A string is actually a thinner, physically thinner string. It cuts into your finger just a little bit more than the tonica as well. In fractional sizes, when you play the G string, I've found out by experience, when you play the G string strongly, just say you play it softly then strong, then you find instead of just the sound getting louder, it also gets higher, so it'll go da, like that, which you don't want. So, you know, they're very affordable, and I think they're just about the best strings in their price range, but, you know, they belong in that price range. Now for Pirastro Evah Pirazzi strings. The Evah Pirazzis, they're enormously strong soloist strings that are very ringing and, you know, they're very exciting strings for soloists. But to me the sound isn't necessarily that pretty compared to the tonicas that I refer everything to. They're definitely stronger and they're a little bit more ringing. But, you know, not necessarily quite as beautiful on my violin or on this violin. Anyway, I'll play them, see what you think. Okay, so definitely stronger, definitely more ringing. I'll play a little ringing. Lots of ring. People get very excited when they put these strings on their violins. I was just talking to Ying the other day. She even did a blog about it. She put new Evah Pirazzis on her violin and she was so excited because it was really strong and really ringing and really wonderful. And they are great like that. For the first week, they can be slightly powerful if you slightly painful if you have a bright sounding violin, but they do warm with time. I've noticed on students' violins when they bring them back into the shop to be serviced or whatever, you'll hear that the sound has changed a lot. So they do mellow out a bit, but they do stay strong. So they're a really good soloist string. I even want to play them one more time just to make sure that I like them. I'm pretty sure I do. Yeah, really strong. Really, really Evah Pirazzi. Right now, Evah Pirazzi Gold with a gold G. Now, I only just got these strings today, and it was like Christmas. I was so excited. I was just freaking out. I was jumping around everywhere. So I put them on this violin, and they were terrible. No, they weren't. I'm just joking. They were really amazingly fantastic. I'd read things about them. Supposedly they were going to be between Evah Pirazzi strings, which for me on most violins are a little bit bright, and Obligato strings, which for me are, you know, quite mellow and slow responding. And I was like, oh, if they're going to be like that, then I'm going to be very excited. And I'm very excited because they are. They just sound really full and ringing and strong and quicker to respond than both the Evah Pirazzi and the Obligato. They're not quite as high tension, I don't think, as the Evah Pirazzi, and so, you know, they don't hurt your fingers as much. They're just really nice, and the gold G looks quite cute. It's just got this little sort of gold sort of looks a little bit gold. But I'll play it for you. Decide for yourselves. There you go. So I don't know if you can hear on the camera, through the camera or the speakers at your computer, but there's a lot of ring in there, and to get that much ring I've usually had to go to Evah Pirazzi, but now I can go to Evah Pirazzi Gold and they ring out longer and they're fuller sounding, and I'm very excited. You have to pay money for them, but they're really, really fantastic. I'm excited. I don't have a set of the silver ones at the moment, the one with the silver G, so I can't review that yet, but excited. Pirastro Obligato strings. Now these strings are really, really different. Now I'm referring most of these strings, trying to get reference from the Tonica strings, Pirastro Tonica strings. The Obligato strings compared to the Tonica are much, much more warm and mellow sounding. But you know, to me, Tonica strings are sort of like a normal sort of violin string sound. The Obligatos are like processed strings. Like the sound is not like, this is not my violin anymore. It's like someone's changed the sound of my violin. They take a violin and they turn it into something that's very warm and mellow sounding. Especially as they wear in, they become more warm and mellow. Even when you put them on, like I've just put this set of strings on, it's a new set of strings. It's made the G sound very warm. On a mellow sounding violin, it'll make it all sound very wolfy. The downside to Obligatos is they're quite slow responding compared to Tonicas and Evah Pirazzi's, which are sort of like a competitor with Obligato, I find, even though they're from the same company. Yeah, so they're quite slow responding. I've found on some violins, on the A string, when you're playing with Obligato strings, you'll be playing the notes and it'll go rah, rah, like it sort of, like it comes out so far, like the sound comes out so far after you've played the note that it makes this weird cracking sort of sound. So Obligatos don't suit every violin. What I use them for is if you have a violin which is really bright, plonk Obligatos on it and it becomes, you know, a violin that you can listen to. I'll play them for you. There you go. You can hear that sort of woofy sort of sound down the bottom there. They have a lot of rings, similar to Evah Pirazzi's and Tonicas and that sort of thing. But they just have this sort of processed, unusual, sort of mellow sound. So don't use them on a slow responding violin. Use them on a quick responding, bright violin, and it'll warm up the sound and make it quite enjoyable. They have a place. I like them. Now for Pirastro Violino strings, or Violino, whatever you want to call them. Now, to me, these are the strings that change the most out of any of the Pirastro line. So you put your Violino strings on, and they sound mellow, and they have quite good response, a little bit of string fizz, but not too much, and they're quite nice. Over a few weeks, you find them mellowing down further, until they're like very mellow, and to the extent of maybe being muffled. For some violins, it's actually pretty good, because if you have a really, really bright sounding violin and you put violinos on there, it'll, you know, after a few weeks, you'll have just a sort of a normal sounding violin, not too bright, won't cut your ears. So they have their place. Apparently, I heard from someone at one stage that they have the same core inside them as the Obligato strings, but different materials around the outside of them. I'm not sure if that's right, but I wouldn't be surprised because both the Violino and Obligato are quite sort of warm sounding strings. So they're the softest sounding of the Pirastro range. So if you have a violin that's really bright and really loud and it's hurting you, then put on violinos. I'll give them a play. There you go. So you won't hear the difference so much right now because this is a new set I've just put on, but you will. Like if you do want really mellow strings or muffled strings or dead strings, then yeah, choose your violino strings. What a great advertisement with violino strings. If you want dead strings, buy these strings. Yeah, they're good. Alright, now for Pirastro Oliv strings. Now for quite a while, these were the most pricey strings that I could get my hands on. They have a gut core inside them, I think on the bottom 3 strings because the E looks like it's too thin to have a gut core. Now they, to me they are really nice and strong and beautiful sounding. They're slightly on the pricey side. They are, compared to Tonica for instance, not quite as much ring as Tonica, but a lot more mellowness. People will play gut core strings because they like the warmths and the complex overtones and that sort of thing in gut strings. Obligato strings, they sort of like are the closest strings to these, I think, in synthetic strings. A lot of people stay away from gut core strings because they're harder to keep in tune. They take longer to play in and keep in tune, and then yeah, they're just not quite as stable usually. I'll play these to give you an idea of what they sound like. So down there on the bottom, they're nice and smooth and deep and everything. One thing that I'm not a big fan about the gut core strings, especially the Eudoxus strings, which I'm not going to be reviewing in this video, partially because of this. When you play the A string, the response sometimes is slower than what you want, and if you're not on your game, you can get this sort of sound. See, I got this little a little sort of weird cracking of the string. Yeah, that one. It's very strange. And if you're not like a good player, if you're not on your game and you're, you know, hacking around on the violin, it can be quite annoying, quite distracting. The Eudoxus do that even more, and yeah, I've had people bring them back and complain about them and that sort of thing. Some people still use them and love them. I don't want to, you know, put you off them completely because, you know, I'm sure they are suited to some violins. But for me, I think like a lot of people, they used to be very popular and a lot of people have moved past those. The Olivs, on the other hand, they're really strong gut strings. They're really beautiful, really rich strings. If you want you know, a wonderful rich sound that still responds very well, they're fantastic. But you've got to just remember their limitations. You know, they're a bit slow on the A string especially, and keeping them in tune can be a little bit of a problem. But I mean, the sound might be worth it. Now on to Thomastik strings. Now the Thomastik strings, first I'm going to do the Infeld Reds. They have this little chart on the back of the strings. It says, pretty much it's saying that the Infeld Reds are very warm and very rich. And I think they are quite warm, quite rich, but they're also bright and they're exciting. They're one of my personal favourites. I really like Infeld Red strings, and I don't hear enough about them. They're warm on the bottom and they're bright and they ring. I really, really like them. And they've got a cute gold E string. Have a listen, I like them. Yeah, plenty of ring. Very full and vibrant as well, you know, like strings that are that are quite warm and quite rich often don't have very much focus and not much sort of presence, but these do. I really like them. I'm already married, but you know, I could marry these strings if I didn't have a wife. Probably not though, because you're not allowed to marry strings. But I do like the Infeld Reds. I think they're worth giving a shot. Now for Infeld Blue strings. Now I'll grab the packet. Once again, on the back of the packet, the Infeld or the Thomastik strings, they have this chart on the back. And it pretty much says the Infeld Red that I showed you before were warm and rich, where these on the packet say they're pretty much the opposite. They're brilliant and focused. So I've actually never really used Infeld Blue before. Maybe I've had them on a couple of violins, but it's never really registered what they sound like in my brain. So this is, I'm sort of like a clean slate as far as Infeld Blue goes. I've just reviewed the Infeld Red, and I've put these on and I played them. To start with, I couldn't tell the difference, which is strange considering it says, you know, they're almost opposites on the packet. They seemed maybe very slightly brighter on the bottom string, maybe not as warm as the Infeld Red, and maybe a little bit brighter and possibly slightly piercing on the E string compared to the Infeld Red. Both of these, like I've been referring a lot to the Pirastro Tonica strings, both of these are so similar to the Tonica strings in their sort of balance and everything that I haven't really referred to the Tonica so much. So they both have similar amount of string hiss, which is slightly more pronounced on the Infeld Red and the Infeld Blue than on the Tonica, and that gives you a little bit more brightness. So basically, to me, I think the Infeld Blue is just similar to the Infeld Red, just a little bit sort of brighter on the G and definitely a bit more brighter on the E. But anyway, have a listen for yourselves and tell me what you think through the camera back the other way. Now it doesn't have the gold E like the Infeld Red, and I can definitely tell a difference between them. I've had a lot of people tell me before, oh, the whole gold thing is just it's just a gimmick. You don't need gold on there. What's gold going to do? It's not going to do anything. You can maybe cut them up and use them as earrings after you've used them as strings, but I can hear a difference. I think those, definitely that E string. I preferred the Infeld Red. It sort of was a bit warmer and more pleasant. But the Infeld Blues, no, I'd use them. They're slightly cheaper than the Reds. They're quite nice. And as I said, I'm sort of a clean slate with them, so no bias whatsoever. I think they're pretty cool. Now for Vision titanium solo strings. Now let me tell you, the other day I was at a trade show and a teacher who I'd sold a set of Vision titanium solo strings came up to me and said, "These strings just don't work on my violin, they sound terrible. They're terrible strings." And so I said, okay, look, well, give them back to me. I'll put them on one of our violins at the shop, and you can, you can buy this other set instead, and you can, sell those ones back to me. And she was happy, and she went along with a different set. I can't remember which set. So anyway, I took those Vision titanium solo strings to the shop, these strings here, and I put them on this antique violin. This is like a 200-and-something-year-old Hoff violin. Beautiful, mellow sounding violin, fantastic. I would marry this. I've already said that I'd marry a set of strings, so I can't marry this as well. But yeah, it's awesome. We're selling it for like $3,500. It's awesome. And I put those Vision titanium solo strings on, and it sounded metallic and horrible. It really did. I'm not even joking. It sounded really bad. And I was like, these are terrible strings. Thomastik would be really upset at the moment hearing this from me. It's my opinion. They sounded terrible, right? And so I was like, well, this is really bad. So when I went to do this video now, I instead of opening a new set of Vision titanium solo strings, I decided I'm not going to open them because I don't want to waste the money opening a set of those strings. I'm going to take them off this antique violin and put them on this violin that we've been comparing strings with. I'll put this antique violin somewhere else. So then I put them on this Struna Maestro violin, which is quite a strong sounding violin, nice, and I chose it because it's sort of not too mellow and not too bright sounding a violin, and it works with what we're trying to do. I put them on this violin and they sound fantastic. I'm like, what on earth is going on? And it just goes to show that you've got horses for courses with these strings. Not every string will suit every violin. I'll play these strings, you won't believe it. They actually sound bright and strong and vibrant and not too harsh and not too not too harsh, not too painful to the ear, and full sounding. I was like, I'm in shock. Anyway, I'll play them. And they have beautiful ring. That E string rings like a bell. It's fantastic. So yeah, I guess, you know, you just have to choose the strings that work with a particular violin. You'd usually think that bright strings would suit a mellow sounding violin, so you could bring it back to being sort of, you know, more sort of even sounding as far as brightness and mellowness goes. But for some reason it works really well with this more powerful Struna Maestro violin. Who knows? Vision titanium solo, yeah, give them a go. Okay, now Vision strings, Thomastik Vision strings. I'm getting very sick of changing violin strings. No, I'm not really, it's okay. Now, the first taste that I got of Thomastik Vision strings was in a set of Thomastik Dominant strings, and they put a spare E string in there, and it just said sample E string. In fact, I can't remember it said anything, just a packet with a string in it. And so each set of dominant strings, I'd have this extra string, and I tried it, and it sounded smoother and more consistent. And the E string, the dominant E string, has this strange sort of weird sound thing going on. And a lot of people will use, you know, dominant bottom 3 strings and some other E string, where the Vision string was very pure and very nice, and it didn't have a sort of thing going on. So yeah, that was my first thing with the Visions. And then we, you know, got a few new packets of Vision strings, and I tried the whole set. They're brighter than the Tonica and the Dominants to start with, and they ring very nicely. And with that E, it's a beautiful set to start with. Maybe a little bit brighter than what I would usually like, and then it changes more. They change more than any other Thomastik set that I know of. They get more and more mellow until they pretty much they die a little bit in not that long. You know, a few months. We have a couple of teachers who specifically ask for Thomastik Vision strings for their students, regardless of, you know, whether that student has a mellow violin or an incredibly bright sounding violin. And we get these students, they'll come back after a couple of months and they'll say, oh, I need a new set of strings, my teacher told me to get a new set. The teachers and the parents quite often are quite happy to do that, because they think the sound of these is so good for those first few months that they're happy to pay the extra to put a new set on after that few months. Yeah, I find them, like, I'm not sure, like, I don't usually use them on the violins in our shop, because, you know, I'm scared people are going to come back after a couple of months and say, oh, your violin's become more mellow and quite dead sounding and it's lost its volume. And as well, they sort of deteriorate as well. The look of them, the A string goes a little bit grey over time. But, you know, if you're happy to change the strings that often, they are a beautiful string, especially the E. I'm not adverse to using the E with another set, because I really like them. I think they're great strings. Have a listen. There you go. It really excels up the top there. It's not quite as deep and full sounding as some of the other sets on the bottom string, but it's a very consistent sound. But I've only just put these on. You just wait and see. In a few months you come back and say, Richard, can you play this violin with exactly those same strings that you played in this video? And I'll say, no, I've sold them. The final set. Thomastik Dominant strings. My fingers are bleeding. I'm changing so many strings. It's been very educational though. Now, dominant strings, they have been around forever and a day. So back when there was the Big Bang, a day before that, before time existed, dominant strings, they were there. They've been there for a long, long time. I used to use dominant strings for all my violins. Just, most of my violins, unless I needed something specialty, a little bit different. These days I use tonica strings, not because the dominants have changed or the tonicas have changed, but the dominants became more expensive at one stage and the tonicas became less expensive, and it was just financially just made more sense to me. Because the tonicas were more expensive, I used to use the tonicas on slightly more expensive violins, which is funny because these days you'll have people come into the shop and they'll say, oh, I've been using Pirastro Tonica strings, but I'm thinking of upgrading to dominants. And I'm like, well, for me that's weird because, they used to be, the opposite as far as pricing goes. For me, they're quite sort of on par as far as the brightness and the mellowness and the strength and the ringingness and that sort of thing. The dominants might be slightly more ringing and slightly brighter and slightly more string fizz to start with than the tonicas, and maybe they stay consistently brighter for longer. But they are a bit more expensive now, and they do have the scary dominant E string. The dominant E string has this weird sort of slightly quirky, weird response thing where it goes wah, sort of when you're playing it. Yeah. Something slightly unusual about it. That doesn't completely put me off, that string, but a lot of people will use the bottom three strings of dominant set, and then they'll use some other specialty E string up above, and it's a very, very popular set, the bottom three and some other interesting string on the top. They're full sounding strings dominants. They're ringing. They're something that back when everyone used to use gut strings, dominants came along and they held more, they were more stable, they were more powerful. They're a fantastic string, and I hugely respect Thomastik for bringing these strings out all that time ago, back just before the black hole. Let's have a listen to the dominants. That sort of wah, sort of E string sound. To me, just recently, and I could just be going insane or something like that, because to me it's diminished a little bit. Like, it doesn't sound as much wah. It sounds closer to sort of a Vision E string. So it's a very nice set, not to be underestimated. I had someone the other day, I told them that some famous violinist, this Japanese lady whose name I can't remember at the moment, uses dominant strings, and they're like, why would she use dominant strings? Surely she can afford Obligato or Evah Pirazzi or something like that. Why wouldn't she use the professional strings? I'm like, it's not all about price. The dominants, all of these strings that I'm showing are professional strings. It's just certain strings suit certain violins, and there's a lot of violins for which the dominant strings are the best set. They're very good strings. Now, by the magic of television, we will play for you each of these strings, all on the same violin, one after another, without the annoyance of having to watch me change the strings. And then you'll be able to choose for yourself which are the best strings for you. And then you'll be able to go to our website, whitehorsemusic.com.au, and buy them at amazing prices. Thanks for all the emails. I'm trying to get through all of them, and thanks for all the encouragement. We're going to keep up the videos. Good luck with your playing, good luck with your strings. Signing out from Richard at Whitehorse Music.